Okay. I'm just waiting. I think that's Gloria just connecting at the moment. So let's make a start. So hello to you all. You've all done previous workshops in this Nature Writing Hours series. So welcome to the fifth and last in this particular series of Nature Writing Hours. The topic for this one is perfecting nature writing pitches. In other words, taking the steps to getting your work published. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm Amanda Tuke. I'm a nature writer. I'm a botanist and birder as well, based in suburban South London. So just the housekeeping for today's workshop. Please stay muted during the writing exercises so you don't disturb other people. But obviously, if you've got any questions, put them in the chat and I'll be keeping an eye on that. And we'll try and answer. And when we do the discussions, we're a smallish group today, so I can probably just open you all up for the discussions, but obviously be mindful of other people and reasonably brief so everybody gets a chance to contribute. The live transcription is enabled as it is always, so please access through your menu if you find that helpful. So that's the introduction. So we're going to go straight, well, we're going to have a first look at what we're doing today. This is the plan for today's session. There's going to be 3 writing exercises and building up this time unusually, because we normally build up to thumbnail nature, but we're going to be building up to the development of a nature writing feature pitch. I'm going to talk you through a successful pitch and the elements of that pitch. We're going to discuss a nature writing issue. I'll share some takeaways with you, and then we'll have hopefully some time at the end where I can hear your views on how today's session went and any further questions you have about pitching. So that's what we're going to try and squeeze in, but my commitment to you is I shall try and make it busy but without being stressful. So that's a challenge always in an hour. So hopefully that's what I'm going to achieve. So let's start with the first exercise, the warm-up. So one of the most important things about trying to get your work into print is attracting the attention of a commissioning editor. So if you're trying to get it literally into a magazine, then they normally are called commissioning editors, or it might be a website manager, or it might be a blogger. But either way, let's imagine you've sent them a cold call email and you're hoping they're going to open your email and see what you are proposing. Now, one of the toughest things is trying to make your email stand out among everybody else's. So if we were talking to the BBC wildlife editor, for example, I seem to remember on a call I heard him, he wasn't him at the time, say that he receives something like 200 feature pitches a week. So getting yours to stand out in that and just not disappear into his deleted pile is extremely difficult. So the most important thing to work on to start off with is a really grabby email title. Now, your email title, I would recommend you start with the word pitch and then colon, and then the grabby title that's the topic of your subject. So I asked you in the pre-workshop activity to come up with an idea of something you would like to write along the piece about. So up to 3 different versions of that email title for your feature pitch, and something which will grab a busy commissioning editor's attention. So that's the warm-up exercise. Don't worry if you find this difficult, because we're going to return to it. It's so important that it'll turn up in each of the exercises. So have a go at that. And if you hadn't already thought of a topic, think of something now that you can use for the exercise, even if you replace it later on. So I'm going to mute me. And I'll give you a 1-minute warning. So we've got, so you've got 5 minutes for that. Okay, so you have a minute left. I'm going to stop you there, if I may. Hopefully that wasn't too horrifying. And then let's have a look at this. So what I'm sharing with you here is a pitch that I made to a magazine which was successful. In other words, they commissioned a feature which was published. So what we're going to talk about, what I'm going to talk you through is kind of three important aspects of pitching successfully. The first one is why this? Why should they publish something about or commission this topic? Why should they commission this topic now? And why should they commission it from me, or in your case, from you? So if you can get those things right, that will really help in terms of how of whether you're going to be successful or not in getting a commission out of this. And in terms of commissioning, I mean everything from print magazines, local papers, websites, guest blogs, anything. The sort of principles are broadly the same. But once you decided where you think you would like your sort of first choice of where you'd like your work to be published, the first thing to do is to check whether they have commissioning guidelines, because some of them will publish that. So if, for example, you wanted to write something for BBC Wildlife, if you do a search on BBC Wildlife commissioning guidelines, you will find some, and I checked that yesterday, so they do pop up in the search. Not all publications have that, but it's the obvious thing to do first of all. And then the second obvious thing to do is to look through back issues to see whether the topic you're proposing has been covered by that publication relatively recently. So if all of those, you've got all of that out of the way, then the next thing is how you construct your pitch. So, and I should say this is a slightly shortened version of the one I sent, just so that it fits better on the slide. So first of all, well, we talked about making sure that you've got a really grabby email title. So in this case, my pitch was, so I wrote pitch, and then I said, in the soil beneath the summer meadow, there's something a little sinister going on. So I'm deliberately not telling the editor what this article feature is about at this point. But there is absolutely no doubt, as I said, I can't overemphasize this, the title is critical. So I agonized over that title for a long time, and clearly it worked. He did indeed open the email and read my pitch. So secondly, when you actually start the email, I tend to start fairly formally if it's somebody I've never spoken to before. So I do the dear rather than the hi, but that's purely personal preference, and you should do what feels right to you. But you must find out the commissioning editor's name. So doing a kind of generic one won't work, and it's usually fairly easy to find out the name of the person who either runs the website, or in the front of a magazine they'll normally have the commissioning editor, but definitely find out their name. Then the next sort of opener is, please would you consider the following article for publication? And as I said, once again, the tone is important. This is fairly formal as well. I remember once hearing an editor of a national magazine saying the thing that really bothered them is when people were over familiar in emails, when they were pitching to them. So I think, if you're not sure, best to err on the side of fairly formal. However, if you have any kind of in with them, so for example, if a writer who's already written for that magazine has said to you, oh, I think you should try it on so and so, then say so there, make it quite clear. And also, if you have met them in the past or had any communication in the past, then say, do you remember we had a conversation about blank? So use that if you have it, but at that point, keep it fairly formal and professional. You can become best mates with them further down the line when they've commissioned 5 articles from you. But at this point, this is a professional relationship. So in the next section, this is where we're going to explain what the article is or what the feature is going to be about. So you'll see what I've done is I've expanded the title. So I've put a little sort of precursor to it. Don't be fooled by appearances. I'm always hoping when I write things like that, they might pick that up for the actual title of the feature, but they quite often don't and write their own titles. And in fact, the title of this one was Vampires in the Meadow, which made me laugh and probably made a lot of botanists laugh as well. So anyway, it explains in this that what I'm talking about is how meadows look all beautiful and harmonious, but in practice, the reason they have so many, particularly in chalklands, they have so many different species of plant is because of parasitic plants, which kind of dampen down the effect of the stronger growing plants. So that's what I wanted to write about. An important part of it is your angle. So initially, I thought I want to write about visiting chalkland meadows, but that's not really an angle. That's just kind of wide topic. So thinking around it, reading around it, I started thinking, well, maybe the parasitic plants will be the thing that will seem a little bit sexier for a magazine that probably doesn't have that many plant articles. So, and absolutely, they love that. So, so that was thinking about something very specific about meadows to talk about. But in that section, I spent quite a lot of time. In many ways, this is a bit like our thumbnail nature. It's giving us sort of a feel of my style of writing in it. It's giving a sense of the kind of range of what I'll cover. And you'll see from this that it's going to be a kind of mixture of creative nature writing, the kind of things we've done in workshops. But I also quite often try and get a kind of scientific element in there because I'm a biologist by background. So that is nobody else needs to do that. That's just how I choose to do my articles. But you should get a sense from there that that's the kind of thing that I'm going to write, and that's what I hope the editor will get. So that next section, starting National Meadows Day, this is the bit which is answering the why now question. So I pitched this article at the beginning of April. I was allowing in my mind a sort of 3-month lead-in time, and actually that's quite narrow for a national publication. 4 months would probably, 3 months, 4 months would probably be better. Because they'll have planning meetings and editorial meetings, and they'll have started filling in sections in the magazine. But I was imagining it would work in a July issue because of National Meadows Day, or it might work in August because that's when meadows managers are encouraged to sow parasitic plants like yellow rattle. Or that could be in autumn, or they sow them in autumn and they collect them in August. So all of those things would sort of work. And yeah, as I said, this one was sent in early April. In practice, it wasn't published that year. It was published the following spring, but there you are. But you're making some suggestions of trying to link it to some kind of topical issue. It's worth putting that in there. If you can't think of any, because some topics are what are called evergreen. They kind of work all year round, so that's not a problem. But if there is something, some kind of national day or something you can link it to, then pop it in there. The next section is about the kind of nuts and bolts of it. So you'll see from that original paragraph, it doesn't really say what I did to write the article. So this is where I'm going to say what the article is going to feature. And as I said, my articles tend to be a mix of creative nature experience stuff, but also bringing in kind of usually talking to other people and quite often talking to experts. And some magazines will specifically ask you to find experts if you're not a recognised expert in that area yourself, to do with nature or wildlife. So here, what I'm telling them is that I'm going to do an account of the visit I make to a chalk meadow and the parasitic plants I find. And then I found some scientists who are experts in parasitic plants, and also a conservation manager, Don Price, who uses parasitic plants. And for each of those people, I had an agreement with them that if the article was featured, they would talk to me. So you'll see that's why it says confirmed at the end of each of those. So in other words, I'd already said to Chris, Alex and Dom, if I get this feature, would you be prepared to chat to me and give me some, contribution to the article? And they all said yes. So sometimes you talk to them in advance, but then that's can be tricky. If your article doesn't get commissioned, they might be thinking, well, that was a bit of a waste of my time. So it was on the agreement that once I got a commission, I would talk to them. Now, the last section is the why me. So here you're telling them who you are. We've done this kind of thing before in workshops. So this is about your unique nature writing perspective, why you're the perfect person to write this article. So I was telling them that I'm a nature writer, I'm a botanist. I've told him I'm a birder simply because one of the articles I've linked in is in a birdwatching magazine, and I've also said that I have a PhD in plant ecology. None of those things are essential, but they just happen to be who I am. And then I've linked in a couple of pieces of my writing, which obviously, so you pick as recent as you can, and if there's things that in sort of related subjects that would make be useful. We're going to talk later on in the session about what you do at the outset when you don't have much published, how to get around that. So for now, I'm just going to leave it there. But in a nutshell, those are the kind of key elements of a pitch, which worked for me. It's not the only way of doing it. I'm not pretending I'm an expert and all my pitches get accepted. Of course they don't. But this was one that did. So, failing any other model, it might be a good place to start. And it's also something that I borrowed from a really good, well-published travel writer. So he gave us a template and I kind of adjusted it for nature writing. So you're very welcome. If you did want to do a screen grab of it before I change the screen, you're very welcome, and then you can hang on to it for future reference. So I'll leave that up to you. Alternatively, obviously, it'll be on the YouTube channel as well. So that's enough of talking from me. Let's think about what we're going to do. So, okay, so you've had to think about already your email title, and I've shown you how that fits in. So the next kind of exercise is to start planning out your pitch. So I've done the bullets here. So something about email title, editor's name, if you already know that, and an opening sentence that feels right to you and kind of sounds like your voice. For the summary section, I would just do, so don't write this as, like a thumbnail nature at this stage, just put bullets of what you want to include in it. So what you're trying to get across is why this topic, why it's so interesting, and what the reader will get from your article, because that's what the editor is going to want to know. If there's anything about why now that you can think of, jot that in. If you already have a sense of what you might, what visits or what natural places you might go that would inform your article, you could start popping those in the features. And at the end, then you could start thinking about how you're going to explain who you are and therefore why you're the right person. So start working. I don't think you'll finish this, but if you start working through that, you've got 10 minutes. And as I said before, if you didn't have a chance, focus on a topic that you'd be happy to write a longer piece about. You can always change it later on before you, do the final submission, and use that just to practice the exercise. So have a first go. As I said before, I will give you, we're going to have about probably 8 or 9 minutes for this. I'll give you a 1 minute warning. So I'm just going to mute now and leave you to it. You have a minute left. Okay, I'm going to stop you there. And just for this section, I'm going to pause the recording. See? And let's do the last exercise. So I deliberately said when you were drafting your pitch for exercise 2, don't worry too much about that summary section. But now that's what I want you to focus on, is that summary section, because obviously that is where, as I said, that's where you're going to demonstrate your writing skills and a sense of what your style of writing is. Doesn't need to be terribly long. So for those of you who've not done this kind of thing at all before and not written long pieces, think of this as a slightly extended thumbnail nature. So it doesn't need to be very long, but it does need to be very carefully written. That's the key thing. So you're using all of your skills that you've used in previous workshops to create a really beautiful piece of writing that will, you want that editor to be going, ooh, this is nice, isn't it? So that's what we're after. So you've got 10 minutes to do that. And I will give you a 1-minute warning as we get near the end of the 10 minutes. If you have time, you could go back and polish your title if it doesn't, if it no longer fits with what you're writing. But I will, as I said, I'll be back in about 9 minutes' time. Okay, so you have a minute left. Okay, I'll stop you there. So what are the takeaways from today's session? So I talked about, in terms of looking at the pitch, or before you actually start your pitch, looking very carefully at the publication that you want to pitch to. So check out whether they've covered a similar topic recently. Are there any pitching, commissioning guidelines? And also, does your idea fit with their style? So that's something to think about. It doesn't mean you shouldn't try something a little bit different, but if you go way off the usual kind of content they cover, it just means you're less likely to get it in. So better to find a publication that fits with your idea than try and force your idea into a particular publication. I would encourage you to, I mean, we talked then about getting your stuff into print or published. I would begin building your portfolio of published writing, ideally online. And I would do it before you've got too much stuff published, so you don't have to go back and start from scratch, putting it all into links. So just keep an ongoing record. I have a spreadsheet which has everything I've had published, and each has a link to where you can read it. So and I did that after I'd had a few things done, so it took quite a long time getting the first stuff done, but now I do it as I go along, so it's a lot easier. And you could also put anything that you've written that is not nature writing, you could put that in there as well in case that is useful. And then finally, as always, spend about 1/3 of your time writing and 2/3 of your time editing and polishing. And that applies to pitches as well, which are super important because it's the first thing that the editor is going to read that you've written. So it's really worth putting the time in to getting that right. There should absolutely clearly be no typos in your pitches. I'm not saying mine never have typos, but clearly it doesn't look good. So you want that to be really polished piece of work. So following this workshop, if you would like to, please complete your pitch, edit it, read it aloud, edit, give it a final polish. And if you'd like me to consider it for commissioning a guest blog from my website, so that would be something in print you could then link to, or something published you could link to, please email it to my usual email address by the end of Tuesday next week. What I'll do is pick up to 3 of the pitches to commission, and I want to be able to post the final features by the end of August, so you'd have a bit of time to actually write the thing. But check, obviously, don't if you submit something that is going to be a trip to Iceland that you're not doing till November, that will make that clear that you wouldn't be able to write it in that time. Everybody who does submit a pitch, I will give you some comments on it. Feel free to ignore them if you want to, but it seems only fair after you've put all the time into writing the thing that you get some kind of feedback. And if you don't want to do any of that, and you can't face sharing it with anybody, but please find at least one person that you feel confident will give you some useful feedback. After all the trouble you've gone to, it seems the very least get something back. So now, once again, I'm going to turn off the recording.